All right, guys, today I'm working on my 2013 Ford Explorer. I got a suspension noise going on this time. It is a strut bearing noise, and it's somewhat of a common issue on this generation Explorers from 2011, 2019. Once they get higher mileage, it's a wear item, really. It's a bearing. This one has 96,000 miles on it, but it's the mount that goes on top of the strut that actually bolts into the strut tower underneath the hood here. And what it is it's a bearing. So the spring is here, the rest of the strut goes here. The strut will turn with the tires, and this piece right here will stay stationary in the body. And so there's a bearing between these two pieces, and what's going on is this bearing is making noise. What's going on is it's binding a little bit and releasing, and that's where you get that dong dong sound. The best way to replicate the noise: turn the vehicle on, center your steering wheel, wiggle the steering wheel back and forth between about 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock. And every time you shift backwards and forwards, you'll get that dong dong sound. I will just be replacing the strut mount, and I'm actually going to go ahead and do it in pairs. So I'll do the main culprit, which is the passenger side, and I'll do the other side as well, because anytime I change suspension parts, I usually try to match them up unless something just flat out snapped or broke. Just something I've always done, because if this side's already worn out, that side's probably not far behind it. The reason I'm going with just the strut mount replacement instead of a quick strut, which is a whole strut assembly, is because this is a little bit cheaper. It's only $65. I have a spring compressor, so I can compress the strut and remove this one really quick and put it back on. If you go with the aftermarket quick strut, sometimes you may not get it as great quality, and sometimes their specifications are a little bit different. The strut itself may be a little bit different. The springs I've seen where the spring rate is actually different than OEM, where they used either a thicker spring or a smaller spring. Plus, when you change the whole strut assembly out, you definitely should go get an alignment. We're just replacing these. It's definitely recommended to get an alignment. This one has a lifetime alignment at one of my local shops, so I just take it there, have them aligned. We're just replacing the strut mount. It shouldn't really impact your alignment, just replacing this piece. I'm going with Motorcraft, which is an OEM brand of Ford. It actually has the Ford OEM part number stamped on it, and it actually has, if you can see here, it's the Motorcraft part number, and it actually has the Ford OEM part number on it. And I know there are aftermarket ones out there, but really it's not that much more, or it's actually about the same price for the OEM ones. I think I paid $65 a piece for these on Amazon. There are two different versions of this strut mount between the 2011 2019 Explorers. There's a cutoff of around September 2012. So if yours was built before, it has a different strut mount than one like mine that was built after that date. The newer ones are a little bit more round. The older ones, best I can tell from the shape of it, is more a little bit square. But I guess there's something dimensionally different about it. But anyway, I'm gonna start the vehicle up, and I'm gonna turn the wheel side to side. I'm gonna clip my microphone close to the spring here, and hopefully you can pick up a little bit better what this sounds like. All right, got the vehicle on the side. I'm getting ready to change the tire. Jacked up and put on jack stands. Make sure you apply the emergency brake. What I did is I rolled the jack in from between the rear and front tire and got it right on that subframe to unibody mount right there, lifted it up, and then lowered it down on my jack stand at the pinch weld where the normal jack is supposed to go. Both of these have pressure applied. So there's two forces holding this vehicle up. This fails, Jack will get it, or hope to so. Jack fails, it's already on jack stand. So off to removing the tire. All right, lug nuts on this are 19 millimeters. All right, so one of the first things we want to do is we want to get this ABS line out of the way. You got, just put 2 fingers back here. It's holding it to the strut. Push it out to the side right there. And then we need to get this clip out. And we'll show that. So I have a pair of panel clip pliers, and what I usually do is I get it behind the clip. There you go. Get behind it and and squeeze, and it pops out. So that way you got some room for this thing to hang down. All right, next we're going to take off the nut on the sway bar end link and disconnect the sway bar end link here. And the way we're going to do that is, since there's a ball joint on the back, if you try to loosen this, there'll be a point where it starts to loosen, but then the stud and the ball will start to spin. So the way we take care of that is we put a 21 millimeter, or in this case I think all I have is a 7/8 combination ratcheting wrench, and we will hold, it's kind of hard to see, but this is actually a hex stud tip, that's a 10 millimeter, and we'll use the 10 millimeter to hold it in place, and we'll use the ratcheting combo wrench to take the nut off. All right, so now it's loose enough, you can pretty much take it off by hand. There you go. And that should just pop out by hand. All right, so it's hitting the back of the body right here. So what we'll do is we'll take this out, that stud, when we loosen the 2 mounting bolts for the way the strut is to the knuckle. All right, time to disconnect the strut from the knuckle. And this right side, you wanted to turn away the nut side, because this bolt has knurling on it to keep this bolt from turning inside here. So you don't want to, get that turning when it shouldn't be turning. So we're going to put a 24 millimeter bolt on the nut side. So then we take a 21 socket or wrench, put on this side, but I will take my impact to the nut side. There's that. And I think, since I got to hammer these out, I'm going to leave the nuts at the very end to keep it from mushrooming when I hammer it. All right, so those 2 are loosened up, and we will get a hammer and we'll knock them out. All right, I already got the top one loose, or I'm sorry, the bottom one is already knocked out to the nut. I'll do this. I'll loosen that a little bit. And there you go. And that's that knurling I was telling you about. And there's your bottom one, and this can be kind of peeled down a little bit to hang, and you can turn the strut just enough to get the sway bar end link out that we couldn't get out before. All right, moving on to the top of the strut tower. These are 15 millimeter bolts. We'll start back here in the back. This cowl can be lifted up just a little bit. Get this on here. I'm just loosening these right now, the ones in the back. I can get those off by hand. Get a shorter ratchet here. All right, this is where these pass-through ratchets excel when you need pretty much a reason for a deep socket, but you only have clearance really for regular height. There's one. There's two. Three. Now remember, when you take this fourth one off, it's going to drop. See how it's lowering down? So I'm just going to go a few more threads. One hand on the strut. Push up. Take that nut off by hand and lower it gently. And make sure you don't snag on that ABS connection. And one thing you need to do when you take it out, make sure you see this, find out where that arrow is pointing. I think most likely they're all facing out, but changing that arrow direction does change your camber. If you flip this out around 180, it will change your camber by 0.5 degrees. And plus, you shouldn't have the arrow facing forward or backwards. It needs to be out or in. And like I said, I believe most have the arrow probably most likely facing out. But then again, check your vehicle to see what yours is doing, because that's how we're going to replace this and install it again. All right, but here it is. So let's get the spring off. All right, I got my spring compressor on it. Got my spring compressed. Everybody's got different spring compressors, but I highly recommend this style. So much more safety than the ones that have two just screws that go on each side of the spring. It took a while to kind of finagle to get the arms exactly where they need to go, but this is a Harbor Freight spring compressor right here. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to compress it to where you can move, the strut mount, freely of the spring. And what we're going to do is initially take an impact, or you can just skip to the next step. This is a 21. But once you get it loose, this whole rod will start to spin. And this 21 millimeter nut, it's super deep in there, so you really need like an offset wrench or something, because it's like that deep. Even a 7/8 oxygen sensor socket won't reach down in there. So what I did, I got my pass-through wrench with a 7/8. It goes on there, and then I had to get a 10 millimeter socket that slides in there, and you will set the pass-through to loosen and your 1/4 inch drive or 10 millimeter to tighten, and just keep doing this. And what this does is it holds the strut stem in place while you take the nut off. It feels loose. All right, and there's your nut. So then we'll take strut mount out, which is toasted. Actually, when this was still on the spring, you could feel like a notch when you turn it where that sound was coming from. It like, as you twist it, it stuck and it break free. So then we'll take our new one here, and thread that through, get our nuts started, and take your pass through and your 1/4 inch and flip directions on both. And now you'll be tightening with the pass through and loosening with your 1/4 drive. All right, and then we'll give it a couple, hold the studs, give it a couple cinches with the impact. All right, now when we loosen the spring, the top pretty much finds itself where it needs to go, but you need to watch the bottom. There's a little rubber stop right here, and I don't know if you can see, that spring needs to fit right in here. So when you loosen it, make sure it all stays pretty much lined up. All right, I got the spring off the spring compressor. We made sure that our spring was in the seat, nice and lined up right there. You can come back with the torque wrench. You can come through with the torque wrench and actually tighten that down now that it's pretty much already tight. It should be 98 foot-pounds. And now it's time to put it back on the vehicle. All right, we're getting ready to put it on. Make sure your arrow that we found earlier on the old one, make sure it's lined up the way it should be. If it's facing out, it should be the same size with the where the bolts go through. And make sure we keep that alignment when we put it through. So we're going to feed it up from the bottom, and we'll put a couple nuts at the top here just to get it to hang. So I'm getting these tightened up now. That's in there. All right, got all those nuts put back on and snugged up. I'll come back later and torque those down to final torque spec. When I was also putting that up there, before I got it fully tightened, I made sure that the stabilizer link, the stabilizer bar links, that ball joint was seated into the strut. All right, lift up your knuckle. If it has a hard time getting up, it may be the axle shaft could be or the CV joint could be separated a little bit. All you got to do is wiggle the rotor hub a little bit, and it should line right back up. Persuasion. All right. Take a hammer. All right, there we go. All right, we'll put these on. I think those were 20. Clip this in and clip this in, so both of these are in place. Now we're going to put this nut on. Which we don't have enough thread sticking out. There we go. Now eventually. All right, so now we'll take that, like I said, it was a 21, 21, but I have a 7/8, and we're going to use something to hold it with here in place so it doesn't spin. Now, with that tight and these tight, you should be able to put a torque wrench on those and get them tight without having to hold anything in place. I'll go ahead and pull the torque specs on that. I'll be right back. All right, got the everything torqued down. The upper strut mounts right here are 41 foot-pounds. The upper stabilizer nut right there, that link nut is 111 foot-pounds, and the two bottom knuckle nuts are 184 foot-pounds, and might as well go ahead and put some thread locker on those bottom two because you don't want those to come out. Next up, we're just going to put the wheel on, lower it down, and see what it sounds like. All right, let's start it up. I'm gonna put the microphone on the same spot on the strut and see if we can pick up a noise. And see how this repair went. All right, so that's how you replace the strut mounts on a Ford Explorer like that. If you're just doing just the strut mount itself and not the whole strut. The only thing that's kind of sketchy about it is anytime you use a spring compressor, it feels like you're messing with a bomb. At any second, it's about to blow. But that spring compressor I got, it's a little bit more safer, like I said, than the two threaded rod style. It's kind of hard to get on there and get it just right to clamp down, but once you do, it's pretty easy. It's actually not a bad job really when you consider it's only like 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 9 bolts, the whole thing. I still recommend most likely getting an alignment afterwards, or at least have it checked, just in case there is just a little bit of variance in that upper plate. And also go ahead and do the other side, because when I was doing that side-to-side test, it sounds like the left is getting ready to get as bad as the right, but you can only now hear it after you got done fixing the right, because the right was so much more louder than the left. So whenever we get some more free time, I'll go ahead and do the left. I've already got the parts for it. So anyway, that's it for this one. If you like this video, I also have a couple other Explorer videos on my channel, and check out some of my other videos, and thanks for watching.